You see, God created you and me and every person and every nation to be his children. He loves us like far more than we love our own children. God is willing to forgive us. Why? So that he can be just in taking us back in relationship and loving us and walking through life with us so that we can enjoy this life with the God who wants to enjoy it with us. Do you realize that that is who God is?
Then I asked Lord, please tell me what I need to do to enter. When you see me next time, I want to enter. He said, I want to see how honest, how true, how sincere you are with me 365 days a year, not just once a week. I want to see your relationship with me. What's your relationship? Once you are back to your family, I want you to love your family and love your children. The wages of sin is death. Commit no more sins. Surrender yourself completely, should underline completely, unto me in your daily lives. Walk with me.
After this life review, he took my hand and we flew. We surfed. It was like we had this wave of light under our feet and we were holding hands and flying like Superman and Lois Lane. So faster and faster and faster. And he was grinning from ear to ear. And it was the most fun thing I've ever done in my life. I saw a light and it was getting closer and closer, and it's a living light. And it's the brightest thing you can imagine, but I could look at it. It's perfect. It's blemishless, infinite in its scope. And that light was love. And Jesus took me directly into the light. And the next thing I knew, I found myself sitting on God's lap. And I have a granddaughter, a 2-year-old granddaughter. And, if she needs comforting, she'll sit on my lap and bury her face in my chest, and I'll put my arms around her and she'll have her arms around me. That's what I was doing. I was like a little kid, and I buried my face against his chest, and I put my arms around him, and he had his arms around me, and I never, ever wanted to leave.
And everything in my body started shutting down. We have the documentation and the timing that my heart and my lungs, I was considered clinically dead for an hour and 45 minutes. I found myself leaving my body and going toward this light, and I knew that's where Jesus and the Father is, and I wanted to be with them. And when I first came in, I remember there was a forest right before me. And when I got on the other side of the forest, that's when I saw Jesus Christ. He was real bright. Brighter than any light I've ever seen, even the sun. And probably what amazed me is I could look at him. And I went down on my hands and knees. And I said these words, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Only reason I was there is because of what he had done. Somebody always said, well, did you see the nail prints? I said, I saw them, but that's not what I was concentrating on. What I was concentrating on is the love that everything was coming out of him for me, like I was the only one he loved. Anybody I thought of in the switch of my thinking, all of a sudden I saw the love for them like he only loved them. And I came to understand that God Almighty goes out and creates love for us that only we can receive. And that's what I was receiving, that love that God had made for me. Now that light coming off of him, I remember it wrapping itself around me. Someone asked me one time, was he hugging you? I said, everything about him was hugging me.
God is far more personal and loving and relatable than you've probably ever imagined. So many people, I think, don't wholeheartedly follow God because the truth is we think he's just a killjoy. We think he's up there in heaven and he's like, anybody having fun down there yet? Well, cut it out. Get back to work. And yet that is not the heart of God revealed through Jesus and through the prophets. It's not the God that near-death experiencers are meeting today. The Bible tells us that God gets us. That the whole reason he came in the form of Jesus was not just to pay for our sins, but also to know that he understands us. It says this in Hebrews chapter 4, Jesus understands our weaknesses. For he faced all the same testings we do, yet he did not sin. So let us come boldly to the throne of our gracious God. There we will receive his mercy and will find grace to help us when we need it most. Not only can God relate to you, but he's kind and he's merciful, just like Santosh and Swadik discovered. He's ready to help when we ask, and nothing's too big and nothing's too small. That's how great God is. Not at them, but at funny things that happened in their life. Does that throw off your paradigm to think that God actually could have a sense of humor or that God could actually be enjoyable? Well, the truth is God is the most joyful and enjoyable being that there is. As I've said before, I don't believe everything every near-death experiencer says. I look for patterns, for commonalities, and how does it align with what God has revealed already? When Heidi first told me that Jesus took her hand and they shot off like Superman and Lois Lane through the universe, surfing this wave of light, I was like, yeah, probably not. And when I hear things like that, sorry, Heidi, if you watch this, but I'm skeptical still. And so I hear things like that. I kind of put them on the shelf like, well, we'll see. And then, what started to happen as I interview more and more people, this 14-year-old girl who died in a car accident, Sarah, and then was later revived, says that Jesus took her on the ride of a lifetime. Listen to what she said. I looked at the water of earth and wanted to see the water, and then whoosh, just like that. We were flying so fast. It was awesome. I was smiling like I've never before, like a roller coaster ride, but 1,000,000 times better. There was no fear of heights or falling. It was a ride I will never forget. And then I had this doctor couple in our church come forward one Sunday when I spoke on this topic of near-death experiences. And they said, hey, we have to tell you why we started coming to your church and how we came to faith in Jesus. And they told me they had both been atheists. They had never taken their kids to church. When their son was 4, one night when Christy, the doctor, the wife, was putting him to bed, he started saying, I want to run and play with Jesus in the fields again. And she was shocked. She was like, what are you talking about? But night after night, he kept saying it. And then she was thinking, we've never let him watch TV about Jesus. We've never been to church. What's he talking about? And finally she asked, what are you talking? When did you run and play with Jesus in the fields? And he said, when he came and got me in the hospital. Well, when he was a little boy, he had almost died multiple times while in the hospital. And that's what opened them up to go like, we've got to find out more about Jesus. And they came to our church and they came to faith. So I hear all these and suddenly, what I've put on the shelf, I go, wait a second. Why not? Who do we think created us with the ability to enjoy life? All the pleasures of life that we have. We wouldn't be able to enjoy the pleasures of life if God hadn't created us with the ability to enjoy those pleasures. So why do we think that God would be less able to enjoy us enjoying those things? I have 2 little granddaughters. I love to enjoy them as they enjoy doing life. God is not less than I am, right? Not less than we are. So the truth is God is the most enjoyable, joyful being there is. And Jesus said this his last night on earth. John chapter 15, he says to his closest friends at the Last Supper, I've told you these things so that you will be filled with my joy. Yes, your joy will overflow. Near-death experiencers talk about how joy comes from being connected to God. That if you're connected to God, if you have turned your heart to God and accepted his love and his forgiveness offered through what Jesus did, joy is actually your birthright. And it's not a joy that's dependent on circumstances. Circumstances come and go, happiness happens. But joy is something God can give us through the highs and even through the lows of life, because it comes from him. In Psalm chapter 37, it says, take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. God is a God who desires to give us good things. It doesn't mean life is always easy. We'll talk more about that at another time. But the heart of God is to give us good things. You know, Jim Woodford is a man that I interviewed who knows that better than anyone. Jim is a commercial airline pilot for years, a very wealthy man. He had actually started many multi-million-dollar businesses. He had his own airplane, his own yacht, his own horse farm, and in the garage on his horse farm, 19 British sports cars. And he said none of that mattered the day he died of an accidental opioid overdose. He said, John, I'd never prayed to God a day in my life, but his wife was a follower of Jesus and had been praying for him. And he said, as he's sitting there in his truck, and he had Guillain-Barré disease, which is a very painful disease. So he gets addicted to opioids. He took too many. And he said, you know when you're dying. And he said right before his head hit the steering wheel, he had this thought, and I believe it's God pursuing us to the last minute. And the thought was, you've never thanked God for the life that you thought was your own making. And in his last moment of breath, he said, God, forgive me. And his head hits the steering wheel and he leaves his body. Listen to how Jim talks about this, because first he saw where he was headed, and he sees a vision of this outer abyss of darkness and a creature who knew his name, and he realized, oh my gosh, hell is real. But he's rescued by these three angels who then show him how God is a God that delights to do good for us, even though we might not deserve it.
I knew I was dying, and I cried out, God, forgive me. In that nanosecond of death, I realized all that I had been given, all I had been blessed with, and I had never once thanked the Creator because I couldn't find proof of His existence. We talk about heaven is real, but so is hell. I cried out, God, help me, help me. I who should expect nothing because I gave Him nothing, why should He help me? Because He's the God of never too late if you are contrite. I look, John, and these three magnificent beings are coming toward me. Very tall, luminous creatures, beautiful in every way. First one, who I later found out had been my guardian angel since my birth, since my conception. The tall angel came forward and said, would you walk with us? We walked down this beautiful 10 to 12 foot wide path lined with flowers of colors that I'd never seen. And I think what happens is God knows us each so intimately, He tailors our experience to the life we had on earth. So for me, when we rise up, I'm looking down on the holy city. He gave me an aerial view of heaven, I suppose, because I was a pilot. We came back down and resumed the walking, and I've always loved horses. The guardian said, James, look, and then behind a group of trees came three of the most magnificent horses I'd ever seen. And as I'm standing there, I look up in the sky of heaven, and I see these brilliant streaks of light going straight up. And I said, what are these? And the guardian said, those, James, are the prayers of your family for your soul, even now going toward God's throne. The angel said, every prayer you've ever issued, ever thought, ever contemplated is recorded in heaven. And it's not to create an I gotcha moment. When you have your life review, when you cross through the veil and you have your life review, it's to help you understand why you made the decisions you did. But I realized I hadn't seen the tall angel in a while. And so I turned to look, and the tall angel was bowing very low, and he was facing this other tall, commanding figure. It was as though this golden liquid light flowed down all sides of this magnificent figure. And the flowers that were already in bloom, when that golden light flowed over it, they bloomed again. And that light pooled around my feet. Suddenly this knowledge of who I was looking at, and I'm looking none other than Jesus Christ, the Son of God, someone that I thought was just a Jewish legend. And here I am looking at this magnificent being. And I realized then that he was what the angel was holding up was the book of my life. And it's no bigger than a cheap roadside diner menu. Mankind should have been my business. And I was just so self-consumed. And I was overwhelmed with sadness and shame. Jesus turned toward me. And he smiled at me. He smiled at me. When I looked into those eyes, and I saw such sadness for the way I had lived my life, but I also saw love for me and forgiveness. From that moment forward, whatever happened, I was his. When he smiled at me and I realized he loved me and I loved him, it felt like I was the only one that he had ever created. You know, there was that instant connection, and you'll all go through that. You are his child. You are his child.
You are his child. You were created to be his child. And to know him, to love him, and to walk through life with him, experiencing more and more of his joy. And all he needs is your heart, just your willingness. So where is your heart right now? You know, God knows your heart. He's right there with you. He always has been. No one knows you better. No one cares more about you. And all he's looking for is a heart that just turns to him and simply says, yes. You know, yes, I want your forgiveness. I want your love. I want your guidance. Come do life with me. You know, if that's your heart, just tell him in your heart, because he has done all that he's done so that you can be confident of his love, so you can walk through this life with God. That's what he said to Santosh. What he wants is relationship. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. If you like it, you know, do all the stuff, click like and subscribe and all that, as we continue to dive deeper into near-death experiences and the Bible and how it can make a difference to help us live our best life today.